So, folks, we need to talk about Tucker Carlson because he, a little over a week ago, released a video that many have interpreted as his manifesto for a potential third party run or even a potential attempt to run for president in the Republican Party. Despite his constant, uh, you know, let's say, rough relationship with the Republican Party at the moment. He's approaching it as an outsider, and most Republicans right now are eager for an outsider rather than some kind of stable candidate. They want the circus show to continue, you know? And, well, Tucker Carlson has, since then, also gone fully mask off with his anti-Semitism. And I say that specifically because if you look over at his YouTube channel here, there's an incredible video from 2 days ago titled Ben Shapiro to America, Shut Up and Eat Your Goy Slop. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, goy slop is a term coined by neo-Nazis and used widely in neo-Nazi corners of the internet. And this video is by and large a nonstop anti-Semitic screed. It is like a real leopards eating faces moment for Ben Shapiro. Though I will also point out that Ben Shapiro was pretty happy and comfortable using neo-Nazis for his own rise to power. Just want to point out he went on this show in 2014, which is hosted by a neo-Nazi. And they had a lovely conversation about who counts as real Jews and who's like fake Jews running Hollywood, etc. He had a lovely conversation because, again, there's a reason why Sam Seder famously calls Ben Shapiro the Pope of the Jews, and it's because Ben Shapiro has a tendency to talk about who are real Jews and who are fake Jews, and for him, it's who is like a fundamentalist practicing member of Judaism and who is merely culturally Jewish. And so, my empathy for Ben Shapiro specifically is limited. However, it should be worrying to everybody that, again, one of the most popular conservative figures in America right now is openly using terms like goy slop and attacking, Jewish-owned segments of the country that he views as objectionable. It's really gross. That is all why I think it is very important for us to jump into Tucker Carlson's manifesto. Because if he is in fact going to run for president, this is likely going to be the blueprint for what he would run on. This video was posted 9 days ago. It has 1.4 million views. And I think it's worth our time to pay some attention to it. Now, it is divided into many different segments. It opens with, how should the system actually work? America should be fair. America should be sovereign. America should be productive. America should be beautiful. America should be healthy. America should be honest. America should be optimistic. America should be wise. America should be decent. America should be united. Now, I do not know if I have the patience to go through all of this meticulously on stream, because this is kind of what Tucker Carlson does. What he does is he makes some kind of largely unobjectionable statement, like, America should be fair. And then he will start from there where people are like, oh yeah, it should be fair. And then he will start to say wild shit. That's kind of the problem with folks like Tucker Carlson, and one of the reasons why I don't think folks should be lining up on the left to ally with Tucker Carlson, even though he's like, I'm done with the Republican Party. Because his criticisms of the Republican Party for example, being in favor of helping Israel, his criticism is not the same as criticism of that same policy position coming from the left. Because Tucker Carlson is coming at it from the point of view of someone who is actually anti-Semitic and who hates Jewish people. And folks on the left who are coming at this are coming at it from the perspective of genocide is wrong and we shouldn't be pursuing that or allowing that to happen if we are at all capable of preventing it. And so there are a lot of people who are going to see parts of this platform and be like, he wants America to be fair. Why do you have a problem with that? And it's just like his method and reason are his methods to arrive at his proposed goals and his reasons for his proposed goals are not the same as those who would, try and say this. Like there are, for example, I'm kind of babbling here a little bit, but an example of what I mean would be like if somebody said America should be prosperous, and you're like, well, yeah, I think people in America should prosper, and then they're like, well, I think America should be prosperous by kicking out all of the immigrants so that there's more wealth available for all of us. I think a lot of people might suddenly go, hey, well, wait a minute. I don't think that's the way. I don't think that's the direction we should be going to make America prosperous. And also that wouldn't make America prosperous. Anyway, but that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. So let's jump into this, see how this goes.
The point of any system is protect the interests of the people it serves and governs. It's just the nature of it. So what's a preacher's job? It's to minister to the souls of his congregants. What's a president's job? It's to look out for, to protect the interests of his citizens. Really, really simple. It's inherent to the definition. So it's been obvious for a while now that our system is not working as intended because the people in charge of it seem to be looking out mostly, not exclusively, but mostly for their own interests. And you see that all around you. Government workers make more than the average American. That kind of says it as clearly as anything, but you see it up and down every institution in American life. A lot of them seem to be run primarily for the benefit of the people who run them, and that is bad. And they're less hidden about it than they've ever been. I mean, they're off buying private islands and exempting themselves from the rules that apply to you.
Just as an FYI, his statement that like government employees make like way more than the average American, this just isn't true. However, many federal workers, when you take into account benefits, do wind up having more compensation than like lower wage workers. Specifically because folks in the federal workforce tend to be trained and into specialized roles like law or different, niche needs, and thus are paid more because they have trained expertise in a given field. Now, you can also work your way up to being one of those employees or one of those highly paid and compensated folks, but it's because a lot of government work is done and protected by either unions or has a set program in place to advance by seniority. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that Doge was tasked with cutting the government. The idea being you cut the senior employees who have worked for decades to get to be where they are and to get the level of compensation that they're getting. And you cut them in order to save the government money, And turns out when you've worked there for decades, you also learn quite a bit about how to do the job well. But, who cares about efficiency, am I right?
And that has caused enormous frustration and resentment.
That's also true. You have to take into account contractors versus like direct government jobs. That's also very true. And also, not every government job is a federal government job because you have local and state level jobs, and those tend to pay quite a bit less than federal jobs. So like it really depends.
And from ordinary people, it's like, wait a second, you're not following your own rules. Like, I have to stay home during COVID and you're going to the French Laundry because what are you, a king now? And the answer is, yeah, kinda. So that's a very recognizable degradation of a system. It just gets more corrupt over time, and the people with power use it to benefit themselves and their families and their friends. And
this is also one of the things that I hate about Tucker Carlson, which is that he will talk about corruption all day, every day. He loves talking about corruption. Corruption of morality, corruption of the soul, corruption of our government, corruption of our economy, etc. He'll talk about corruption all day long. But he doesn't address the vehicle for that corruption, right? The underlying, vector for that corruption, which is, of course, capitalism. The reason you get corruption in government is because you have set up a system that allows corporations who have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit. You've set up a system where they are able to buy political favors from politicians by donating to campaigns, by donating to super PACs an infinite amount of money. And so what winds up happening is these corporations, this capital, accumulates power and then uses that power and wealth to buy political favors that then allow them to accrue more wealth and power. And then that system just keeps going until, you've gotten a corporation that's bigger than and more powerful than the government in some cases. We actually have just seen an example of that with the Tesla strike that was happening in Sweden, actually, where Tesla, instead of making a deal with the striking workers, was flying in workers from other countries in order to break the strike, and then individually went through and bought off every striking worker in Sweden, paid them a large amount of money to simply not work at Tesla anymore. And so eventually we've arrived at now where there are no workers who are on strike anymore. So the strike is done because they bought all of them out. And so what happened there is you had an entire country of unions coming together to say, no, you have to make a deal with these striking workers. None of our different union brothers and sisters are going to do any contracting or work with Tesla. And now all of these unions had to put out statements essentially saying, well, because we no longer have union brothers and sisters to support who are working at Tesla, the strike is done. Tesla in this case is larger and more powerful in a very dangerous way than a whole entire coalition of different unions and even government support in Sweden. When Tucker Carlson omits capitalism from what he's talking about, it allows him, it's deliberate, right? He's doing this deliberately in order to essentially insert his own narrative. And he's doing that because he's a grifter. He's a grifter, and he's doing this on purpose to manipulate people.
I don't
he's very
want
good
a
at
post, but
I understand Megan Fox's giant boobs. I appreciate the restraint, though. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Tucker is as conservative as Marjorie Taylor Greene grifters. Well, the thing is, I don't really care if somebody is conservative because they genuinely believe it or because they are a grifter. Functionally, they serve the same purpose in our system. If he runs for president and he's a grifter, the amount of damage he can do as a conservative grifter is still astronomical. Doesn't matter if he really believes it or not. The damage that could be done could be counted in millions of corpses. Donald Trump ran for president twice as a fraud, as a grifter, and he's made out like a bandit. He's wealthier than he ever has been, and millions of people around the world are dying. It just doesn't matter if he's grifting or not, because either way, the destruction is real.
After a while, you call it the Epstein class because that's exactly what it is. It's a group of self-interested people acting on their own behalf against yours. Okay. And that's, again, bad. But it can...
And again, this is what he's doing. He's like, oh, it's the Epstein class. But what he, instead of saying capitalism, what the connection he makes is Jews. The connection he makes is, the bad guys that he's trying to construct with his videos. And it's not, he doesn't say everything in every video, but when you take his work in its totality, that's effectively what he's saying.
limp along for a long time because that's just the nature of systems. That's the Ottoman Empire went from conquering half the world to being kind of pathetic and just basically focused on the harem. And in the end, it dissolved. But something different has happened to our system, and it's obvious recently. So it's one thing to have a system run by people who are looking out for their own best.
Von 400, well put. Tucker doesn't have to believe in conservatism to wield it as a weapon for his own class interests. Exactly.
Interest and not yours. Again, we've had that. It's another to have a system that's totally incapable of responding to reality, that is basically paralyzed. And unfortunately, ominously, that's the system that we now have. And we know that because the two greatest threats, arguably in all recorded history, and those would be nuclear war and AI, are looming right in front of us. And no one in our society in a position of authority seems capable of responding at all or even really acknowledging that this is happening. It's like they're frozen, staring at the tree as it approaches the windshield at 70 miles an hour. It really does feel that way. And if you listen carefully, that is where we are. So we are moving toward, on this trajectory, if it holds, we are moving toward a nuclear exchange because you have two conflicts, one in the Middle East and one in the Near East, Eastern Europe, Ukraine and Iran, that are suddenly somehow merging. And what does that mean? It means a world war.
Okay, but that's not what's happening. There was a risk of that for a very brief amount of time, but it does not seem to have escalated from where it was. Specifically, when Ukraine attacked Iranian vessels shipping, I believe, oil or munitions to, I think it was munitions to Russia. Now, that was a problem, for sure, that risked the conflict spreading. However, the real risk that's happening right now in terms of global geopolitical conflict is that the United States is kind of being revealed as a paper tiger. The munitions at critical lows, our inability to replenish them, the fact that we are, the military industrial complex is taking untold amounts of money, literally, to supposedly create arms and ammunition for the United States government, and seemingly is just producing one missile every $1 billion. All of that is way more damaging and brings us way closer to the brink of conflict than basically anything else with countries like China. But the main thing here is that at no point here does there seem to be any risk, at least so far, of nuclear escalation. The only real risk of nuclear escalation comes from Donald Trump being, a dementia-addled fool who's surrounded by yes men. That's the real risk, but it's not, Russia is going to nuke the United States or China is going to blitz a nuclear attack against the US. That's not what's going to happen. So, he's kind of talking out of his ass, but he's doing it in a way that is designed to attract Christian nationalists. You all noted the first thing that he talked about at the very beginning was how pastors see to their flock in that system. But what he's doing is trying to be we're heading towards a crisis, and, maybe I'm the only kind of guy who can fix it, And
you have two sides with essentially inflexible positions. Not to get into the details, if you're following this, if you're one of the small percentage of Americans following this, you already know that there's no obvious resolution to either one of those conflicts anytime soon, and yet the stakes couldn't be...
Well, wrong. Number one, wrong when it comes to Iran, because the United States simply lacks the ability to continue to pursue war with Iran. In a matter of months, we've burned through 80% of our stockpile of interceptor missiles. That there's no way for the United States to win the war with Iran. We could nuke them, I suppose. I don't think that would even be a catalyst for winning that war. As for Russia and Ukraine, Russia seems to be losing the capacity to wage war. specifically because their economy is still standing despite global sanctions. However, Ukraine has been developing technology that allows them to strike deeper and deeper into Russia, disrupting a lot of their ability to get diesel, gasoline, to ship things around the country, and also disrupting civilian economic activity as well. And like that's causing some seismic damage internally within Russia. So there's some pretty severe time limits on what is possible from Russia, what is possible from the United States. And I don't know, I don't think that there is like a clear resolution that's going to happen in either of those conflicts soon, but I don't suspect that they are going to get wider and bigger because the United States lacks the capacity to like really pursue a wider and bigger conflict, and Russia is not in a position to fight even harder. If they could do that, they would have done it by now.
Higher. And of course, the key participants in both of those wars, now becoming one war, are nuclear armed. And they feel that this is, to use a very tired term, existential for them. And so unless, again, the angle of attack, the trajectory changes really soon, we are going to wind up inevitably with the use of weapons of mass destruction. And you have one participant, President of the United States, openly threatening that already on Truth Social, on the internet, for everyone to see. We're going to eliminate your civilization. Well, of course, you can't do that with tomahawks, but you can with nuclear weapons. So you have the President of the United States, whatever they tell you, openly threatening the use of nuclear weapons in a conflict that has no immediate or obvious resolution. So where is that going? Well, toward a nuclear strike. And what happens then, God knows. But if you can even live with that fact, if you can even say...
I'm sorry, we can't even beat Iran. If we nuke Iran, like the entire world will turn on us overnight. And like the United States has already damaged its reputation on the global scale. You know, if anything, this is so far merely pointing out that Donald Trump is an insane fool.
Or just acknowledge without words that, yeah, this could wind up with people unleashing nuclear weapons on civilian populations. You're already around the bend. You've already proven yourself incapable of leadership because that's crazy. That's beyond reckless. It's literally suicidal and homicidal. And at very least, you're paralyzed. You cannot act in defense, not simply of your country or your civilization, but even of yourself.
Is he sunburnt or spray tanned? My understanding is that he is like, I don't think it's spray tan. I think he like purposely tans himself, like over tans himself in order to make it look like he's been outside all day. It's to go along with the wood cabin aesthetic he has going on in his studio.
But that's where we are. And the same goes for AI. Now, of course, it's unknown, as with the wars in Ukraine and Iran, where AI winds up, and maybe it's just a big bubble. It's the 2000 tech bubble. It's pets.com 100x, maybe. Or maybe the predictions of the people who are developing the technology turn out to be true, which is that it's like the end. At best, we give up our ability to make important life decisions to machines. We put machines in charge of our lives. That's at best. And at worst, the machines decide to kill us all and there's nothing we can do about it. That's what they're saying. Not, the doomsday prophets of Twitter, but the people who are developing this technology are saying, oh, by the way, this thing that we're making could kill everybody, and at very least will make certain that your kids and grandkids and probably you don't have jobs. And we're going to, I guess, do something about that, but it's not clear what. And that's coming in like a year. Huh? What's remarkable about that is not simply that the people doing it are admitting it, really trying to get our attention, telling us we're doing this, but that no one is doing anything. They're just mesmerized, a fixed stare at this thing that might be the end of everything. Who acts like?
Okay, but also AI isn't going to be the end of the end of everything. I can't stress enough. There is no possible, like, we know, like, the math on how large language models work. There are insurmountable problems to get them to function the way that, these AI CEOs are talking about. And the important thing to realize about all of the huge claims being made by these AI companies and CEOs is that they're hype men selling a bubble. They're selling a dream. And like the end result of that is just to get dipshit investors to drop billions of dollars into their company. That's it. The reason they make these claims, the reason they talk about doomsday scenarios is because it makes the technology look even more powerful, and investors want to be the first. They want to be on the ground floor. They want to be on it before it gets big and, powerful and scary. And the reality is the technology is incapable of delivering any of these things. It is not capable of doing this. You cannot overcome the AI hallucinations. You cannot overcome a lot of these hurdles in the technology. You cannot overcome the cost of compute, which is colossal. The only reason people have been using it at all is because these AI companies run at astronomical losses. Astronomical losses. If the full cost of compute was passed on to the customer, which is increasingly being done, by the way, more and more of that cost is being passed on. It's why you've seen many companies that have adopted AI switching from use AI as much as you can, employees, to you have a certain amount of tokens every month that you can use in order to use AI in your work. Use them wisely, employees. And like that's just like the first wave of passing the cost on along to the consumer. And frankly, it's kind of understandable that some people would get hooked on it when it's offered for free, right? Because if you can just sit down and be like, okay, AI, I need you to write me a 10,000 word report with like XYZ characteristics, go for it. And it does that. And, it turns out there are grammatical mistakes, there are spelling errors, there are nonsensical half sentences, etc. Like it's laid out poorly, whatever. When you're doing that and it's being provided to you for free, that seems like it's pretty forgivable, right? Now imagine that report costs you $1,000 to generate. Well, suddenly you're kind of like, well, shit. Wait a minute. I should maybe instead have this being done by an actual human employee because they can do it without any mistakes for, far less than $1,000. Like that's really kind of what's being run into here. It's the fucking brick wall of the entire industry.
Well, normal people don't act like that, and certainly functional systems don't act like that. So without belaboring it, what does that tell you? It tells you that the system has reached the end. That's not actually a system that's working on anyone's behalf. That's a system that is bound for probably pretty imminent destruction. So that's going away. And if we've probably known that, any system that elects 80-year-olds to run the place, cynical 80-year-olds, is not long for this world. Like it's not reproducing in the same way that 80-year-olds don't reproduce. It's the end. And it is. And that's sad. And, certainly I've spent a lot of time complaining about it. But at this point, it's just obviously true. And so it's worth thinking about what comes next. Well, something, assuming we're all here, and you have to assume that. You certainly want to. And even if it's not true, you still have to plan for it because we don't know. So something's coming next. Something will replace the system. And the highest hope is that...
And then jack up the price so they sell you their kidneys trick. A classic.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same business model as like Uber, right? Like you subsidize Uber rides so that you run all of the old taxi and cab businesses out of business, and maybe even lobby the government to like discontinue bus lines in certain parts of the city. And in the process, you then, once you have no competition and once there are fewer buses, then you start, you lift your prices. You lift your prices up, and there's nothing anyone can do about it, because if they need to get someplace across town, what other options they got?
That replacement, whatever does come next, will be the result of an incremental process that people have time to metabolize and buy into, approve of. that we don't get an abrupt change, because abrupt changes of political leadership are, well, they're called revolutions. And they're not typically an improvement over what they're replacing. And they have their own downsides in any case. So you hope that this will somehow evolve into something less crazy, less cut off from its core mission, which is to serve the people who live here, and more humane and more pro-human, et cetera. That is just better in every way. You hope that. But in any case, we're getting something different. And
this is the other thing, right? Which is that Tucker Carlson is sitting there being like, well, you just hope that whatever comes next is good. And like, I'm here to tell you that's bullshit. You don't just hope that whatever comes next is good. You need to put in the work to try and make the thing that comes next good. Like, you need to actually become politically active. We live in a democracy. We have the ability to go out and use our tools and organize together so that we can affect the outcome of what comes next. Specifically, if you want a better outcome, if you want a more utopian ideal, then you have to go out and organize with other people and help make that dream a reality. Democracy has never supposed to be just something that happens to you. It is supposed to be participatory. You are supposed to engage in it. It is supposed to be an activity that you do. Tucker Carlson is somebody who actively opposes that idea because he wants to replace your participation in democracy with himself or with some other authoritarian he can get behind and profit from.
And the question is, what will that be? And again, we don't know. We know that changes in technology or power shifts globally, all of these facts on the ground are followed by political changes. Political changes follow those changes. They don't incite those changes, right? They're responses to those changes. And so we're getting political changes. They will find political expression. And will it be a third party? Probably. The most radicalizing fact of American politics in the last, century is the confirmation that we got on or about February 28th that the parties on the big issues are identical. Trump initiates the one thing he said he'd never do, a regime change war in the Middle East against Iran, a country much bigger and more powerful than the last regime change we attempted, which didn't work. And there were no protests against it because, of course, the leaders of the other party, his supposed enemies, agreed with him completely, as they did with his budget fundamentally, certainly with the tax code that he endorsed. And that tells us what? One thing at least, that on the issues that really matter, the most obvious and historically significant expressions of the exertion of power, which would be foreign policy and the budget, tax code, the parties are aligned. They're the same. They have the same agenda, exactly the same agenda. And they...
I wonder why. I wonder why that is. If only someone could, mention why two disparate political parties might be aligned. If only there was some mention of some kind of economic system through which, our means of production is owned by a handful of people, and those people then imbue these systems to distribute things to maximize profit at all cost. It's almost like when you set up political entities, which is what corporations are, to maximize profit over all else, that will include at the expense of government integrity. It will include at the expense of the public. It will include at the expense of everyone and everything, because the way the system of capitalism works is that capital consumes everything. Platonic ideal of a corporation is a corporation that has taken over the entire globe. Everyone is enslaved to it, and it is able to then maximize profit for its shareholders. That is the Platonic ideal of a corporation. And right now, we have a bunch of different corporations trying, over the long arc of history, to become that Platonic ideal. And so that's obviously going to be a problem when we're talking about why two disparate political parties may have similar ideas when it comes to taxation, for example. Seems like it'd be pretty relevant, no? Does your stream feature playback for subscribers? I'm not sure if it does on Twitch, but you don't have to be a subscriber or like a member over on YouTube to go back and watch earlier parts of the VOD.
Go through this whole song and dance to convince us, no, we're really blood enemies, but are they really? No, they're not. And once again, just to restate the obvious, because you can't state the obvious enough, if Trump's opponents really opposed what he was doing, well, then we would have people in the streets, famously, and the party whose whole self-understanding is people taking to the streets and marching for this, that, or the other thing, especially peace, would be marching for peace and against this war, but they're not. And why aren't they? Because they're not against it. That's why. Not to complain about it, but just to sort of set the predicate for the next stage in our lives as American citizens. We know that the parties are aligned on the issues that matter against the population. Now, how do we know it's against the population? Because we have public opinion polling. And it may not be precisely right, but over time, we get a pretty clear picture of people's priorities. And the big things that the US government, endorsed by both parties, are doing, which is spying on you more, moving an ever-growing share of gross domestic product to a smaller percentage of the population, invading countries, spending $1.5 trillion a year on a military they can't win a war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the things that they're doing, the big things. Population doesn't want those things. And they're really concerned, despite a lot of hectoring from their leaders, about the price of burritos. And you could say, well, that's awfully small-minded of you, and you shouldn't be eating $20 burritos. But, you know, maybe people want to choose what they eat, and they don't want to pay 30% more for it over a year or whatever the number is, but it's a big hike. And so if you really cared what people wanted, you would take that.
If only all of these price increases had anything to do with a certain economic system.
In the streets, and a rather big one.
Indeed, Nathan. In fact, one might say the No Kings protests were the largest protests in American history. One might say that, and be correct.
That seriously.
Hey, Maliki.
But as noted, not only do the people in charge not care what you want, they're actively hostile to what you want. And the fact that you want it is evidence to them that it's illegitimate. Well, you shouldn't want that. You entitled little kid. What are you, a college student? The ones who aren't going to have jobs thanks to the AI, they're all invested in. I mean, you see, this is like it's too disconnected to continue. So probably going to get a third party or multiple parties. Is that the best system? I don't know. It's better than the one we have.
See, this is now why people are saying like, oh shit, is Tucker going to go third party? Now, apparently he was approached by Marjorie Taylor Greene and Joe Kent to try and get him to run third party or see if he was actually going to. And they came away from that meeting saying, oh, he's not going to run. I don't believe that yet. I don't believe that he put together this 1.5 hour long video to say, oh yeah, no, maybe we need a third party. We need something better than now. Anyway, let me draw out my vision for America. I don't think he did that without any intention or any ambition behind it to run for office. Now, how he plans to do that, I'm not sure. But I do know that he has always had that ambition.
Will that be enough, is the question. And the answer, the hard answer, is no. Because when you hear people say, well, there's no political solution to this, well, of course, you're rooting for a political solution because the alternative is something, kinetic, as they say. And you don't want that. You don't want violence of any kind. But you also know that there are no political solutions to anything, really, in any system. Because the society behaves consistent over time with the values and concerns of the people who live there. Which is to say, if you want to change human behavior, passing laws against it doesn't get you there. What gets you there is convincing people it's the right thing to do.
I mean, I will say, if this is an attempt to feint that he might be running in an effort to boost his numbers and boost his views, I'm actually way more comfortable with that than him actually running. He's the only person in the field right now that I'm actually worried is going to make a run at the presidency in 2028. He's the only one that I would be worried about. If he's not going to run, then great.
Obviously, there's no law against screaming the F word at your toddler in Walmart, probably, or certainly in the parking lot. Can't be arrested for that. There's no statute that says you can't use vulgar language with your kids, but who does that? Well, very few people. Because if you try that, give the finger to an old lady in a crosswalk, probably not illegal. No one does that. Why? Because if you try it, obviously people are like, what are you doing? That's disgusting. And so you don't. So in other words, if you want to change a society, yeah, you definitely need more options on the ballot. You definitely need leaders who want to serve the citizens of the country because they care about the citizens of the country. And of course, service follows caring. If you love someone, you want to serve that person, obviously. But more than anything, you need a population that has clear goals, that knows what the program should be. Don't give the finger to old ladies in a crosswalk. Just don't do that. We all agree. You need a consensus on what we're doing here. Like, what is the whole point of this? That's what you need to start. And it turns out if you have that consensus, a lot of problems get solved over time, not immediately. Some problems are, if not intractable, very complex. But if you get the fundamentals right, they tend to get better over time. And if you don't, they inexorably get worse. That we know. And so any effort to fix America's systemic problems with technocratic solutions is by definition doomed to fail because it doesn't address how you got here in the first place. So how did we wind up with $1 trillion in debt? Trillions and trillions, unpayable debt. Well, because we kept electing people who added to it, including the current occupant of the White House. Now, why did we do that? Well, because we have a pretty distorted understanding about what debt is and what it does to people and nations. We're not setting the right goals. We don't think that's important to avoid debt.
Well, wait, as a nation state, it's not that important to avoid debt. It's actually an asset to have a certain amount of debt. It's not good to have too much debt. It's also not good to have no debt whatsoever. Because when you have debt, it allows you to, by allowing yourself to take on debt, rather, it allows you to spend beyond your means on things that might be important, things that might allow you to build up infrastructure and future capacity, for example, or provide for your people in certain ways. And simultaneously, by having debt, you can then sell shares in that debt to the American people. This is effectively what war bonds are, for example, because war is expensive. And so, for example, during World War II, people could buy bonds. You might be familiar with this from like the Captain America movie, the very first one, where he initially gets his start as a guy going around telling Americans to buy bonds. And that was being done because it is a way to then have people invested in the nation, and it gets money to the country, and also is then something that the country promises to pay you back in the future. My grandpa gifted me those as a young child. Yeah, of course, and they are considered widely, or at least historically, American bonds have been considered one of the most reliable long-term investments, because you do make like a tiny percentage of interest on those bonds, but the interest is very, very low because it's viewed as one of the safest investments you could possibly make. And that's something that is good for financial stability. That being said, every single time a Republican has been in office for as long as I've been alive, they have massively run up the national debt, despite calling themselves the party of fiscal responsibility.
If we did, we probably wouldn't, over many decades, have accrued a debt that is unpayable and, in fact, controlling us. So all of this goes back to one of the things that nobody in politics ever admits out loud, but is just true, which is the most important thing you can do if you want to change a world, a region, a civilization, a nation, a neighborhood, a person. The most important thing you can do is tell the truth out loud, always. The words are the most important thing. They're not the whole solution, but they're the beginning of the change. Tell the truth out loud. Say what is true.
This is one of those things that sounds really smart to stupid people. Say what is true. Sounds really great, right? except when you then hit a point where multiple people are in a room and they disagree on what is true. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever been on like an internet forum. Those are old-timey things where people would talk to each other on the internet. You could get into months-long debates about simple definitions. You could get like it was a cluster fluff, okay? And so when he's like, just say the truth, Fivehead, like, yeah, I also think it's a good thing to say the truth. But the problem is saying that, like, oh, the solution to all of our differences is to start with what's true. Like, that sounds great until you realize that conservatives believe that reality is fundamentally different from what folks on the left believe. They cannot comprehend the world as the left sees it. And that in turn leads to like a truly intractable problem, which is that, you know, it's kind of something that is, I think, revealed by the problem with flat earthers, for example. And I've talked about this at length with the conspiracy singularity and how it brings in all of the different conspiracy theories and how the right actively actively courts the conspiracy singularity, actively spreads disinformation and brings people into this, you know, singularity of conspiracism. That's because they are anti-fact. It is an anti-empiricist movement. That's one of the reasons fascism relies upon an anti-empiricist worldview, is because if you cannot verify that anything is true, then the fascist movement can convince you anything is true. And that is what then leads to, you know, an unquestioned cult of heroism that leads to, or rather the idealization of heroism and sacrifice for the state. And then you have, of course, the end result of that is the death cult mentality. You know, what greater gift could I give than to give my life for, you know, the fascist cause? And that's a big problem when we're talking about the differences of truth between the right, the fascists, and the left, you know, people who believe in democracy and education and all that jazz. It's a big problem.
And there are a lot of ways to prove this, but the only meaningful relics we have of any former civilization are the ideas that they promoted, the words they said. And to the extent those have survived, they have affected and influenced subsequent generations. The most important legacy.
I mean, this is also just not true historically. Like we know a lot about past civilizations, not just from their words and ideas, but from, of course, their monuments, their pottery, their sociological remnants. Anthropology and archaeology is great.
The legacy of the Roman Empire is not its aqueducts, some of which still stand because they were awesome architects and great builders, and they used stone, not reinforced concrete, and that's all impressive. But the most enduring legacy of Rome, of course, is Christianity, which with Constantine was a state religion, and it's still the world's biggest religion. So it's the words that matter above all, and that's why tyrants famously, and all governments actually, try to constrain what you can say. That's the first thing they do before they try to disarm you.
You know, it's what's really wild to me. Can I just Christianity is the greatest legacy of the Roman Empire is truly wild, considering that, I mean, like, Christ literally is quoted as saying, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's." So, like, why are you rendering unto Rome what would belong to Christ? But setting that aside, of course, like, this idea that Christianity is uniquely Roman and a Roman gift to the world, I think would be very strangely received by the vast majority of Christians who aren't in this evangelical bubble that Tucker is trying to court here. Oh, Jack, Christians don't know what Christ said. That's true. That's true. Like, even I know that's stupid. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. Like, it's the words that matter. Sure, words and ideas are important, but like, what? Like, you're attributing to Rome those ideas when they didn't
We
come
named the
from Rome.
planets after Roman gods. Mars is just Aries asterisk 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 asterisk. I am tired of this.
We named the planets after Roman gods. Mars is just Aries. Fuck, I'm tired of this. Well, yeah. I don't know. There are a lot of ideas. Rome crucified Jesus, technically. They deserve a lot of credit for that, I guess. 'Cause without that, Christianity, not a thing, I guess.
Is they try to tell you what you can say. And so we thought it would be useful just to set down the goals of whatever comes next. And it'll find all kinds of expressions. And hopefully it's better than what we have, but we know it'll be different from what we have because what we have literally doesn't work. It can't protect itself from the greatest threats in human history. So here are the 10 things that when all is said and done, America should be, and probably has been in the past, but certainly should be. And if you get these right, if you could buy in on these, and it shouldn't be hard because almost everybody agrees with these.
Almost everyone agrees with these. It's just like, but the problem is, on the left, it's like, oh, everyone should have healthcare. And on the right, it's like, yeah, everyone should have healthcare. And we'll get it by killing all those immigrants. Like that, like, what? Like, that's the problem. Like, on the left, it's like, everyone should have healthcare. We'll get it by taxing, wealthy people and by paying, like, a universal tax that would ultimately be quite a bit less than if we each individually paid for health insurance. The right is just like, no, we'll get it by killing immigrants. And it's just like, what? Like, you can agree on an end point and disagree vehemently on how to get there.
Then you can actually have hope that the system will be more responsive. It certainly won't be suicidal. That the country itself will be vibrant and alive and not dying. It won't be living off its cultural inheritance, which we still are, and it's getting a little lean. When the best things in your society, from the founding documents to the architecture, are all things made before your grandparents were born, it's a problem. In fact, it's the end. So what is rebirth? Well, rebirth begins with stating the things you want to be. What should America be?
Child trafficking is one of those issues that nobody wants to talk about because it's
Jesus Christ. I was not prepared for the ad read. Here's our top 10 list of rebirth. It starts with child trafficking.
Christianity. Politics just reminds me of a few months ago when lawmakers both for and against child marriage quoted the Bible. What happened to separation of church and state?
Oh God, I'm sorry. We gotta play that again.
Just should America ends with stating the things you want to be. What should America be?
child trafficking is one of the
What should America be? Child trafficking. Fuck. Oh, he really doesn't give a fuck about anything he's saying, does he? God, if he, because if he gave a shit, he wouldn't immediately put an ad break right there. Oh, especially this ad break. Oh my God. AI could never. Really makes you think. Oh God. I'm sorry. That was really funny. Holy shit. He's being honest to what Republicans want America to be honest. Yeah. Yeah, he is. Alright. It's funny, but seems like it shouldn't be. Oh, it absolutely shouldn't be. But we have to laugh, otherwise we're just gonna cry. Like, what a terrible man. And what a terrible set of ideas. Very clearly grifting. Because, if you gave a shit about your message, wouldn't you think before you put an ad break there, hey, maybe we shouldn't put, right after what should America be, a hard cut to child trafficking? Now, I gotta be honest, there's another hour and 15 minutes of this, and I'm not sure how much gas I have in going through this, because it's already so disingenuously awful to me that like I don't see where we could possibly get more value out of this. I guess I'm curious what you guys are thinking in the audience. If you guys are thinking we stay on this, or should we move on to something else? I think I got it, to be honest. Yeah, like I don't know how much more of this like we can really, how much more use we can get out of this. I guess I do want to skip to the end and just see kind of like his wrap up.
Which is that both parties have colluded against the population to make their lives better and our lives worse. There's kind of no arguing that that's a fact at this point. And unfortunately, they have been extremely successful. So if you're going to fix it and rebuild this country and turn it into a place that the grandchildren you hopefully will have can inherit and thrive, you're going to need to do something about the pressing question of American identity. What does it mean to be an American? But it's fixable. You just have to.
God, the video ending with like, hey, watch this Glenn Greenwald interview, or watch Tucker Carlson talk about how Ben Shapiro is responsible for goy slop, a Nazi term, just seems to really put a pin on all this, isn't it?
To try. And we will be trying. And we'll tell you as we continue to do that.
God, the fucking little banjo, like, it's so insincere. It's ridiculous. I don't know. I guess, you know, I am morbidly curious a little bit here. Okay, I'll tell you what, guys. I'll use some of my time off stream to go through this at like a rapid speed to see if it is worth our while to go through the in-between segments where he lists out the ideas he has in more detail. But I suspect that they will be hollow and not at all interesting or compelling, and basically along the same lines as the problems I've already pointed out, which is that he's completely unwilling to point out why all these things are happening, the underlying system of capital that leads to these results that he's critiquing, and is instead more interested in putting it on the political parties just being innately corrupt somehow. And so I'll go through it and I'll see if it's worth our time to cover in more detail and in more depth. But I suspect it might not be, but I will save you all the pain of going through it, okay? All that being said, folks, if you got anything out of this, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and leave a comment. Commenting really, really helps the video and the algorithm. And also, just let me know in the comments, like, what do you think about this? Did you find this like a compelling argument from Tucker Carlson? Because it seems very hollow and empty to me. But I do think it draws upon a very real rage that people feel towards the failures of this government. So let me know what you think about that in the comments. And if you want to do something about this to stop Tucker Carlson, you got to get organized. So join your local Dems, join your local DSA. If you don't know where to start, we can help you. Join our Discord. There's a link down in the description, or you can use !Discord in any of the chats, and you'll get a link. And you can reach out to GamerG for help joining DSA. You can reach out to Dragonfly for help joining your local Dems. They are organizers who have spent years building up folks in their respective organizations. They can help you too. And also, last but not least, check out ImogeneOlivia.com, gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes, tested with cis men, cis women, non-binary folks, trans men. It is comfortable, sexy, non-tucking lingerie. We just got full restock, 2 new sizes, and a new color. Go check it out, ImogeneOlivia.com. Link down in the doobly-doo. Let's keep on going.
Riverboat deck is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, dating, plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.